Mayors across British Columbia want the province to hand over at least 40% of cannabis revenues to help municipalities pay for the expenses of accommodating legal marijuana sales when they begin next month. The sharing arrangement suggested by the Union of BC Municipalities would be similar to how Ontario has said it will divvy up provincial profits from legal cannabis. The proposal will be voted on by mayors of BC's towns and cities at the annual UBCM conference next week. Vancouver Councillor Carrie Jang, co-chair of a provincial municipal cannabis committee, said the proposal, which includes a payment of $25 million upfront to local governments, was based on helping communities recover the estimated $50 million total they will need to help in nearly a century of cannabis prohibition. The Federation of Canadian Municipalities actually suggested 50%, but looking at the actual dollar amounts, it ended up being around 40, said Mr. Jang, who pushed to create Vancouver's cannabis shop regulations, passed in 2015. BC is expecting legalized cannabis to bring in $75 million a year from its share of the federal excise tax, with legal sales estimated to be worth $1 billion in the province. The 40-60 split would only apply to projected provincial excise tax revenue of $125 million over the first 2 fiscal years of legalization. Any revenue above that total should then be split in half between the province and its municipalities, the proposal states, with every community receiving at least $10,000 regardless of its population. Mr. Jang said he expected the UBCM will adopt the position and an agreement with the province will soon be reached. A spokesperson for the provincial finance minister did not respond to a request for comment on the proposal Thursday. A little more than a month away from legalization, Ontario and Quebec are the only provinces that have announced how they plan to share their cannabis revenues with communities. Ontario, which recently ditched public storefront sales in favor of private retailers, has agreed to give cities $40 million in cannabis excise tax revenue over the first 2 years, or about 40% of the projected revenue of $100 million. Quebec will give its local governments $20 million of its projected $73 million revenue, roughly 27%, from the first 2 years of its cannabis excise tax, and it will also commit another $42 million toward public safety efforts across the province. After the first 2 years of legalization, the UBCM wants to review this revenue sharing agreement and determine whether to stick with it or scrap it in favor of increasing the provincial sales tax on cannabis products to up to 10% from the existing 7%. If that happened, then local governments would cease getting revenue from the excise tax and negotiate with the province as to how much of the provincial sales tax would flow into their coffers, according to Mr. Jang. We're trying to keep the price low enough so people will stay with legal pot as opposed to going to black market sources, which could be cheaper, Mr. Jang said of the approach. That was for us the reason why we said let's look at that maybe 2 years from now, as opposed to up front. Mr. Jang added that those communities that want to opt out of the retail sale of cannabis, such as Richmond, will still get the same amount of revenue from the UBCM proposal. Whether or not there's a pot shop, it should be like healthcare. You may buy your cigarettes in Vancouver, but come down with cancer in Burnaby, he said.